Step into the ring of fraud game and unleash your inner fight with our unique training program, seamlessly integrating and blending the art of boxing with the science of fraud prevention and detection. Today we have a very interesting program for you where we are going to cover all the main skills that for you as a fraud fighter you need to use for you to punch the fraudster in their face and figure out how can you implement all these techniques for you to gain the leadership skills. Just like boxing, every move counts, and in fraud, every detail counts. We are gonna equip you today with all the skills needed for you to detect, prevent, and counter fraudulent activities with confidence and fitness. So let's get started. In 2024, the landscape of fraud examination and anti-fraud practices is continuing to evolve, driven by the advancement of technology, a change in the regulatory environment, and the increased sophistication of fraudulent schemes. Today, we are living in a very complex world where we need to go and navigate all these trends effectively as a fraud examiners, as anti-fraud professionals, for us to be able to gain all the skills that we need to enable us to detect, investigate, and prevent fraud with the precision and efficiency to effectively address these emerging challenges. And they can do this without strong leadership. Leadership is a key. Anti-fraud leaders should not only have the technical knowledge and skills to investigate fraud and uncover all the fraud schemes, but also they should be equipped with all the leadership skills for them to be able to lead their team effectively, communicate and manage the fraud cases, and figure out how they can communicate the finding internally and externally with impact. Today, we are going to discuss a diverse set of skills that you need to have as a fraud fighter for you to be able to combat fraud effectively and uncover all these fraudulent activities. So here are the 10 skills that we are gonna discuss today related to fraud leadership skills. What are you gonna use for you to be able to combat fraud and hit the fraudster in their face? So the first thing is very important for us to have what we call visionary thinking. So think about you as a fraud examiner, as a person working in the department. You don't need to be a manager. They say leadership is not a position. Leadership is a mindset, is a skills that you have and implement every day. You can be working in the fraud department, you can be working in internal audit, you can be working in the control department, you can be financial manager or even an employee. If you have the right mindset, if you have the visionary thinking to think about how can I go and fight fraud in my department, in my position, based on the tasks that I have. It's all about your ability to envision long-term goals and strategy for you to be able to prevent and detect fraud inside your organization. The same way organization, they have any kind of strategy inside the organization where we call it financial strategy, or we call it operational strategy, or we call it marketing strategy. We need to have the same thing, what we call anti-fraud strategy. So anti-fraud strategy is about how can we in our organization figure out how can we implement fraud prevention, fraud detection, and fraud response to be able to deal with fraud cases. It's not anymore, we call it a risk management, internal controls. It's about figuring out how can we implement the proper strategy over all the organization on a strategic level to be able to fight fraud inside every single department, inside every single unit, based on every transaction we have. And we link this with the key performance indicator of the organization. The same way in our organization, we have what we call key performance indicator, we need to have what we call fraud risk indicator to link them with the organization and be able to measure fraud in real time. So it's not enough for us to just defend our organization. Today, we are living in a world where fraudsters need to be attacked. You need to punch the fraudster in their face. You need to strike back. Like George Washington said, the best defense is a good offense. And I'm here to tell you today that don't just dodge fraud, you counterpunch it. It's all about how can we go and prepare our organization to proactively anticipate and predict fraud trends, to figure out the future fraud trends, future schemes, and be able to fight it effectively. So this is the first skill that you need to have. Leadership starts with the proper vision. The next thing, what we call effective communication. You as a leader, you need to have clear, concise way for you to communicate with your team, with all the stakeholders. in all the departments to ensure that we have alignment of our anti-fraud initiatives. Sometimes organizations in different departments, they are fighting fraud in a different way. Some organizations, they say, let's implement controls to prevent fraud, while other organizations, they say, let's respond to the fraud after the case happened. This is not alignment. If we are thinking about different controls, and sometimes this control, they are contradicting each other, or sometimes these controls, they are duplicates. So how can we go and make sure that we are working together as a professionals in our organization to be able to communicate effectively? And one of the ways that we communicate effectively today is using in data visualization. Data visualization or link analytics is a very good way for us to visualize our work. Rather than presenting the tables and the data and the graphs, we are going and we are going to link. We are going to say, here's the fraudster, here is the fraud scheme he used, and this is the way he used it. So we need to be able to understand the information on a different level. We call it data in depth. Be able to connect all the perpetrators and the fraudster schemes for us to communicate exactly how these fraudsters, they did the fraud and how they moved the money. Today, you as a leader, you need to have effective communication skills, because communication is essential for any fraud examiner to enable them to articulate clearly to the stakeholders all the evidence that they have, to be able to present the evidence in the court effectively, so in that way the judge will understand the case, to be able to educate everyone inside the organization and create awareness about fraud and different fraud schemes. Today we need to make sure we as a fraud professionals, anti-fraud professionals inside the organization, we are building trust and fostering collaboration with different internal parties and external stakeholders for us to be able to support anti-fraud initiatives. And we need to also, very importantly, to build the culture. The culture always a very critical issue. They say culture can eat strategy for breakfast. So how you as a fraud examiner, you need to go inside the organization and make sure that everyone understand why fraud is important to fight, why we need to catch fraud, and how we need to report it, and to who we need to report it. And at the end, you as a fraud examiner, how you are reporting fraud effectively to senior management, to audit committee, to ensure that they are going to take the right action. It's all about your ability to convince the leaders inside the organization. If you don't have the ability to convince them, like what happened recently in this new movie in Netflix called Gold Bricks, where the lady working in management told the executive management, we are going to implement a new inventory system. But this new inventory system that you are going to implement, they are going to have a marginal error of 1.1% of the inventory. The meaning, if someone steals less than 1%, we will not be able to catch them, and the management say, it's okay, we accept this marginal error. So in that way, if once they accept the marginal error, employees inside the organization, they were aware that actually if they steal less than 1%, no one will uncover them, and they start stealing a lot, especially that the value of the inventory is 200 million. So they can steal 2 million and no one will notice. And this is exactly the danger. When we are working inside the organization as anti-fraud professionals, we need to communicate effectively the fraud risk. We need to explain to them the method used. We need to understand how we can implement the proper control to ensure no one is going to take advantage of it, and to ensure that the management, they assess the risk properly and they have the proper risk appetite to fight fraud. So the third skills that you need to have as a fraud examiner, as anti-fraud professional, is what we call data analysis and forensic. Today we are living in the world of data. So you need to be proficient in data analytics tools. You need to understand how can you use forensic technique for you to be able to handle all this amount of data that we have. In hard drives, we have it in our computers, we have it on the cloud, in data center, and we have so many data available for us today to analyze over the internet. Some data is even available in the dark web. So how can we be able to go and analyze all this data? Your ability for you to look at these data, analyze them, uncover all this pattern, uncover all this fraudulent activity, and be able to conduct the investigation effectively will differentiate you as a leader using today the digital world that we are in. It's not anymore you are going to do it manually, where you are going to open an Excel and you are going to do it. Today we need to have advanced data analytics tools for you to be able to do the analysis in an automated way, to do on continuing audit, to do what we call real-time audit, to be able to even implement some scripts to predict fraud or monitor fraud on a regular basis. So your ability to utilize these advanced tools and forensic analytics tools will differentiate you as a professional to be able to help the organization in building a robust cases and mitigate the fraud risk effectively. And we see it today in so many organizations. When they are trying to implement these tools, they are thinking, okay, let's buy all these tools and invest so much money on these tools, and then they forget the anti-fraud professionals. It's like when you go and you are doing boxing and you buy all the equipment, you buy the gloves and you buy the clothes and you buy all the tiers, and you don't get a training. So you don't know how to do the punching. You don't know how to fight. You just have all the gears without the skills. And this is unfortunately what happened in our organization today. Organizations are giving so much money and investment related to the tools, but they are forgetting to make these individuals gain the proper skills for them to be able to do it effectively. So how can you go as an anti-fraud leader inside your organization and tell the organization it's not enough for us to buy the tools, we need to gain the skills as well for us to do data analytics in the proper way. But not only data analytics. Today, data analytics is one part. The other part, the other skills that you need to have is artificial intelligence and machine learning. Are we using AI effectively for us to implement the proper algorithm, the proper mechanisms to be able to capture fraud in real time? Do we have what we call fraud detection and prediction capabilities inside our system to look at complicated pattern, to look at anomalies in the large data, to be able to uncover fraud in an effective way in real time? Or we are saying, no, we are going to rely on this software that we have it in our computer where someone, a human, is going to come and use it. Today with AI can do so much work. Even, let me tell you something, my presentation that I'm doing for you, so many of the information that I got, I didn't get from an article or get from Google, I got from AI. So I went to AI and I asked AI, today we are living in 2024. What are the major skills that for us as anti-fraud professionals, as fraud examiners, we need to have? I ask AI, what are the leadership skills that you need to have for you to be able to lead your anti-fraud department or your anti-fraud initiatives inside your organization? And AI gave me so much information, but of course, I'm not going to read all this information. AI gave me around 100 pages of information to look at. Rather than that, I told AI, here are all the information you give me. Can you summarize in a very effective way the 10 main skills, the 10 critical skills that you as a fraud examiner you need to have? And AI told me these are the 10 skills, and based on that, I prepared my presentation today. So always we need to understand, for us as anti-fraud professionals, why we are going and thinking only inside our organization. Go to AI and say, I am working in oil and gas company. I am working in, let's say a government entity. I'm working in a bank. Based on my operation, can you tell me, ChatGPT or any AI tool, what are the major fraud risks? Where are the area I need to look at? Where are the exposures? What are similar cases can happen? What are the fraud schemes? Let AI do so much of the work for you. Be careful, don't share with them private information. You can obtain from them general information. But if your organization is using any AI tool inside the organization, speak with your IT department, speak with your legal department and see, as anti-fraud professional, how can you use these tools for your advantage? Because today we are operating in the digital revolution and we can go and conduct investigation in the same old way. Today, always we need to think about advanced way of doing our work, to think about a new way, innovative way to make our work faster, easier, and more powerful for us to uncover these complex fraud schemes. Now, the fifth thing that you need to have as anti-fraud professionals is what we call today, cybersecurity expertise. It's not enough for us as a fraud examiner to say we are going to leave cybersecurity to who? To the IT department. We are going to leave it to the cybersecurity professionals. No, today most of the fraud, imagine just last year, about 8 trillion related to fraud happened related to cybersecurity. So 8 trillion out of 105 trillion global GDP. So around 8% of our global GDP lost to fraud. They say this year, in 2024, they are expecting to be more than 9.5 trillion. So cybersecurity is a very critical issue. So for you as a professional, how are you handling cybersecurity? Because most of the cases that we discover related to fraud got element of cybersecurity, where someone, they are inside the organization, they have a privileged user, and they use that to their advantage to do their fraud. Or someone outside the organization discovered that your employees are not following the proper security procedures, so they were able to hack the system. So definitely, so many of the fraud cases, they are going to be involved cybersecurity element. So for you as a professional working in anti-fraud, do you have an understanding of the different cyber crimes? As a person working in fraud examination, do you have the knowledge for you to be able to safeguard sensitive information inside the organization and prevent data breach? With the cyber crime on the rise, fraud examiner must be well versed in all the skills related to identifying vulnerabilities in digital system, implement proper security system inside the organization, advice management, what kind of control we need to have when we are speaking about controls in our operation, or controls in our purchasing department, or control in our accounting department, or control over all the organization. We are speaking about different type of controls, and this is where fraud examiner, they come and they add value. It's not only about IT control. When we speak about control, we speak about different types of control. It can be a physical control. No one is allowed to enter our organization without permission. It can be about the what we call logical control, technical control, the IT control. No one is allowed to enter our server, our system without permission. Also, we speak about administrative control. We need to make sure inside the organization we have the proper policy and procedure to determine what we need to do. For example, you need to change your password every 30 days. You need to make sure the password is complicated. You need to follow certain procedure in resetting your password. You need to follow certain procedure when an employee will leave the organization. You take from him the ID, you take from him the online access, you take from him the login, so he will not be able to enter to our organization physically, or he will not be able to enter through the system and obtain our information. So all these are important skills for us to have. Because today, for us working in the cybersecurity, we need to stay ahead of the threats, of the emerging trends related to ransomware, related to phishing attack. Today, we are living in a very critical world. And for you as a fraud examiners, you need to have the skills. For you as an anti-fraud leader, you are gonna play an important role in collaborating with management. In an event of a fraud incident, in an event of cyber attack, in event of data breach, what are you going to do as anti-fraud professionals to be able to support the organization? The fraud department inside your organization can lead the incident response plan in case of a data breach. They can help in mitigating the damage. They can help in recovering the assets, and they can partner with the IT department to make sure these initiatives are implemented effectively. They can work with them to implement security patches. They can help reset the compromised credential, and they can advise how we are going to communicate with the stakeholders inside the organization and outside the organization. Overall, the fraud department can play a critical role in enhancing organization cyber resilience, to be able to detect fraud, to be able to prevent fraud, and to investigate any incident related to cyber fraud. Today, we are living in a digital environment, and for us, we need to be able to be proactive, to collaborate with the organization to make sure we have the proper internal controls to ensure fraud is not going to happen, to ensure cyber fraud is going to be controlled, to safeguard our asset and our reputation. And this is very important and critical role for you to have. So as anti-fraud professionals, I highly recommend you that you go and gain the knowledge related to cyber security, understand the different types of control we need to have when we are speaking about organization. Because today we are living in the digital world. Most of our system is controlled by IT system. Most of our operation is controlled by different kind of technology. It can be from the minute you enter your organization to the minute you open your laptop to the minute you run the machines, everything controlled by these systems and is connected with the cloud, connected with the Internet of Things. So it's so easy for a hacker to enter the organization, or maybe there is an insider threat. Maybe an employee working inside your organization, he is doing the fraud. And this is where we need to understand, do we have the proper administration over the access? Who can access the HR system? Who can access the accounting system? Who is allowed to access which kind of department? Without having the cybersecurity skills, in the digital age we are living in, you will not be able to fight fraud effectively. So having that knowledge is really critical. Now let's speak about number 6. Number 6, which is very important for you, like in any profession, you need to understand the regulatory compliance and money laundering schemes. Today, we are living in evolving regulatory environment where compliance are changing every day. So it's critical for you as anti-fraud professional to understand exactly what are the legal elements, what are the standards, what are the rules, what are the regulations related to your industry. For you, you need to understand when you are trying to conduct an investigation in certain country, what are the local laws and regulation? When you are going to certain country to be able to uncover fraud, what kind of compliance program you have to follow based on certain requirement, maybe by the regulators. If you are a bank, maybe by the central bank. If you are a listed company, maybe by the stock market. So for you as anti-fraud professionals, you can't go and operate based on your own. Asking the management, asking the legal department, asking the compliance department about what kind of controls related to fraud and related to compliance misconduct that need to be implemented based on the local regulations and international laws is very important for you to be able to implement anti-fraud controls and later to investigate fraud. So are we actually getting familiar with these regulations? Like I'm working on a very interesting project in Saudi Arabia, it's going to be launched soon, about how we took all the regulation in Saudi Arabia related to fraud, corruption, related to bribery, and we put them all in one book where everyone can go and read and understand. It's very important for you as anti-fraud professionals not only gain global certification where you understand the regulations related to fraud based on international law, based on common law, based on civil law. Also, you need to go to your country. You are in UAE, Oman, you are in Malaysia, in US, in Africa. You need to go and understand what are the local regulations, how they define fraud, how they define bribery, how they define money laundering. Because we can see today, money laundering is a very big and trending issue. And when we are speaking about money laundering, different countries, they define money laundering differently. They define money laundering recovery differently. They define how we are going to investigate the schemes of money laundering in a different jurisdiction based on different laws. So some countries, they will tell you, when we are recovering money related to schemes of money laundering, in case the person bought a house with the money he gained from money laundering, we can seize this house, which is normal. Yes, in most of the countries, they are going to say that. But in some countries, they say, no, no, no. If the person bought a house from the money he received from the crime, we can recover it. But if the money he received from the money laundering, he lost it. Let's say someone did a fraud for 1 million. Then he laundered the money, then he bought a house for 1 million. Then for one reason, he lost his house. He sold the house and the money lost. Then after 10 years, he really worked hard and he made money and he bought another house. The question here, can we get that house as a compensation for the money he stole, for the money laundering he did or not? And this is where you need to go and understand the regulations. Is it allowed or is not allowed? Based on what we can go and do asset recovery in this country. Based on what we can go and investigate issue related to cybersecurity. So your knowledge related to cybersecurity as anti-fraud professionals is very important for you to understand how a person using a cryptocurrency to launder the money. How they are using blockchain technology and cryptocurrency transaction to help them actually hide their illegal fund. And at the end, how can we find the evidence as anti-fraud professionals for us to be able to link the cryptocurrency that they use with the money they stole from our organization. So today, understanding the different kind of trails for us to look at, how are we going to obtain the information from the digital wallet providers, from the cryptocurrency exchange, to be able to link the fraudsters that we are investigating with the fraud that he did with the money that he got over cryptocurrency is very critical. Having knowledge of what kind of regulations related to cryptocurrency we need to follow in the country we are operating in is also very critical. So these are the trends that we are speaking about today. Most of the fraud will have an element of money laundering, which is very interesting. They discover that more than 80% of the cases when a person will do corruption, will do fraud, will do criminal activity, the money that they will receive is dirty money. So what they need to do, they need to clean the money through the proper channels. But they can't, because the proper channels, they are going to ask them questions. So what they do, they clean the money through the dirty channel, meaning they are going to do money laundering. They are going to try to trick our financial system. They are going to try to do structuring, deposit the money in small increment. They are going to try to do smurfing, give the money to different individuals to deposit them in their account. They are going to try to move the money through different illegal entities. So this is why most of the cases related to fraud or corruption, they are going to have elements of money laundering. And the interesting thing that in some country, money laundering punishment, like in Brazil, is more than the punishment of doing the fraud itself. So if you go to a bank with a gun and you steal the money, maybe you will go to 5 years in prison. But if you go to the bank and steal the money and launder the money later, money laundering, it can be 10 to 20 years in prison. So sometimes we need to understand that when we are taking cases against the individuals, it's not only cases related to the fraud and corruption they have done, but also related to the money laundering schemes they have. And it's very interesting for us as anti-fraud professionals when we understand the rules of money laundering. If we are dealing with a financial institution that help the fraudsters that took the money from us in laundering the money, we can go after these financial institutions. So for example, Bernie Madoff, if you remember the case of Bernie Madoff, he was able to do 65 billion in fraud by doing a Ponzi scheme over 30 years. So imagine he opened a bank account with the bank, and he is depositing billions and taking out billions, depositing billions and taking out billions, and no one is asking any questions. So the big issue here, after we discover the fraud, the regulators, the customers, the victims, they said, how come the bank allowed them? How come the bank helped them in doing the fraud? The bank can see the money coming in and they can see the money coming out, but they are not asking any questions. Everything is okay. So then we discover that most likely the bank is aware, but they don't want to question this person because he's a very powerful person, he's doing business with them in a long time, but looks like they are not doing the proper due diligence, they are not asking the proper questions. So the regulator went after the bank, which is JP Morgan, and they told the bank, you have to pay around 1.7 billion as a settlement fine for the victims related to this fraud. So sometimes this is what we can do as anti-fraud professionals. We can use money laundering investigation technique for us to not only be able to recover our money, but figure out who are the other parties who are facilitating the money laundering, who are helping the person in hiding their money. Sometimes someone will go do fraud inside your organization and he will give the money to his cousin. So now we can find the property but under his cousin name. So in that way, his cousin now involved in our case. We need to speak with our legal department and look at the regulations, because maybe now we need to take action against him and against his cousin, because his cousin helping him in the process. He is facilitating the money laundering for him and he is helping him in hiding his fraudulent fund. So understanding the regulatory environment is very critical for you. So after this, I really highly recommend you to go back to which country you are in and say, let me go and understand what is the definition of fraud, what is the definition of corruption, what is the definition of money laundering, what is the punishment, what are the legal elements of it. Because understanding that in a local environment where you operate is very critical for you to have a successful investigation and to help the compliance department in implementing the proper rules. I have done training to so many international organizations where they are saying, yeah, listen, we are going to do training to all our global offices. So they have global offices in Africa, they have global offices in Europe, and they have global offices in Asia. And they say, here are our compliance rules. When I read the compliance rules, it's very interesting. Why? Because they are speaking in general. They are not customizing the compliance rules. Okay, what can happen in Asia different than what can happen in Africa, different from what can happen in Europe? Understanding the local regulations will help you keep your international compliance policy, but also customize the policies based on your division, based on your operation, based on the local laws in the countries. Otherwise, in some countries like Europe, maybe your compliance rules is a violation of the rights. If you say in your compliance rules, we are going to monitor your emails, we are going to look at your personal information, they are going to say, no, sorry, we have general data protection regulations saying you can't do that for European residents. So always you need to go and speak with your compliance legal department, understand the local rules, regulation, and make sure you customize it to fit your operation. So this is a very critical skill. Now, let's continue. Skill number 7, which is very, very important in the world we are living in today, which is risk management. Your ability as anti-fraud professional to assess the risk associated with the fraud, to develop a strategy to mitigate fraud in an effective way, to be able to balance between the organization ability to achieve their goals and the constraints. What are the challenges that they can face? This is very critical part. Today, we have what we call fraud risk management principle that just published by COSO in collaboration with the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. And I highly recommend you to go and read these principles. So these principles about how can we go as anti-fraud professionals and tell the organization is not anymore is okay to have some internal controls here, some internal control there is not effective. We need to have the proper skills. We need to have the proper fraud risk assessment inside the organization, where we are going to go first. We are going to go and ensure, do we have the proper culture before we start the risk assessment? Do we have the proper ethics, the proper tone at the top? Do we have the proper values inside the organization? Without having what we call governance inside the organization, any effort of managing risk is not going to work effectively. So first we go inside the organization, have what we call the foundation, governance. Have what we call the control environment. After we have the culture, governance, control environment, structure, processes, we need to say, what are the risks that we have? We need to go and identify the risk. So you, as a fraud examiner, are you sharpening your skills related to identifying the different type of risk can happen? It's like, think about it like a boxer. I'm standing here and I'm trying to protect myself, but I need to identify the person can hit me down. They can hit me on the side. They can hit me up. So am I identifying the different types of risk that's gonna come? Without identifying this risk, I will not be able to deal with it. So I need to look at the fraudsters, I need to look at the person who's gonna do fraud, and I need to identify what kind of hit he's gonna do, what kind of punch he's gonna do for me to be prepared for it. So first is about identifying. After we identify the different type of risks that can happen, we need to assess this risk. Is this high or low or medium? Really? We are living in the digital age and we are still thinking about risk high, low, medium. Who's thinking about this anymore? Today we are living in a world where we need to have what we call risk scoring. We need to look at the risk and say, this risk is 70%. It's 80%. I love it, especially in boxing. In boxing, when I do boxing and I'm doing with the machine, when I hit the machine will tell me, you are hitting with a power of 80%. When I hit very soft, you say you are hitting with a power of 30%. So the same thing, I need to identify the person who is gonna punch me, the fraudster who are gonna do fraud against me. What is the amount of damage he's gonna cause? What is the likelihood he is gonna do it? And based on this, I need to assess. My fraudster is gonna actually do a damage of 90%. So I need to really be prepared. Or the damage is gonna be only about 10%. So in that way, I need to implement just preventive measures. So this is where we need to go and be able to identify the risk, and then we need to be able to go and assess this risk properly. And then we need to evaluate the risk. We need to say which risk we need to address first. This is what we call your skills as an anti-fraud professionals. Do you have the ability to understand the priority? Which risk we need to address first? Is this risk or this risk? Understanding and implementing priority is very important to be able to focus on the risk that is severe, not focus on risk that's not important. After that, after we finish what we call the fraud risk assessment process, which is three things. We identify the risk, we assess the risk, and we evaluate the risk. Now, step number 4, what kind of fraud risk management program we are going to implement? What kind of controls we are going to use to be able to reduce this risk to the acceptable level? And then the final stage, which is monitoring. Are we implementing the proper controls in place to monitor, to ensure this risk is monitored in real time, to be able to keep it at a low level, at the acceptable residual level? So fraud risk assessment, fraud risk management is a very important skills for you as anti-fraud professionals to have, to help the organization in doing the whole process of fraud risk management. Remember, it's not your responsibility as a person working in the fraud department. It's the responsibility of everyone inside the organization to assess the risk and to be able to document it in the risk register. Not in the operational organizational risk register, no. Not in the IT, no. Today, they say every organization should have 3 risk registers: operation, fraud, and IT. And you need to go and make sure that this is updated on a regular basis. This is connected with the key performance indicator. The same way we have the key performance indicator, we are creating in our operation the key risk indicator. And we are changing the risk indicator based on real-time events, connected with our operation, connected with our system. So in that case, for us as anti-fraud professionals, we get alerts in case any fraud happens. For us as an auditor, we get notifications, something unusual, we need to go do an audit. Rather than we wait for 2 years and then we conduct the audit and we discover, oh my God, there's a fraud happening last 1 year and we are not aware about it. Operating in real time is all about connecting our real operation with our real system to identify fraud in real time when it will happen and to increase or decrease fraud risk based on real data happening from our operation. So this is very critical skills for you to have. Now, skill number 8, which is your ability to have proper professional thinking, They say a fraud examiner, anti-fraud professionals, they need to have innovation. They need to have what we call professional skepticism. They need to have the ability to adapt. They need to be able to change. So some of us, we started working in anti-fraud 15 years ago, and we are still using the same method. We are implementing the same technique. We are using the same tools. Why we are not evolving? Your ability to evolve. Remember, fraudsters, they evolved. Fraudsters today, they are using AI to help them draft better emails to do scams against us. Today, fraudsters, they are using AI for them to be able to implement more sophisticated schemes. They are using different types of tools for them to do even behavioral hack. They are not doing only technological hack, behavioral hack. They say, what kind of psychological games we need to play against the victim to convince them to be able to scam them. So your ability to adapt in the changing environment where we can see so many trends, regulatory change, so many technological advancement will help you be able to fight fraud effectively. You need to have innovation. You as a fraud examiner, you need to encourage your staff to have creative thinking. Think in a different way of handling fraud cases. Develop a new approach or tools or technique for us to be able to do fraud prevention and detection. Without having these new skills, a new way of thinking, fraudsters are gonna do fraud against you in a new way, but while you are thinking about the old way of fraud. There's a very interesting case happened to a guy working in the customs. So this guy working in the customs, and this guy always inspecting the boxes to ensure that all the traders are paying exactly the right amount of taxes related to the goods they bring. So one trader, one time he came and he said, I am bringing with me cheese. So he's bringing glasses of cheese. So the inspector, he said, I want to inspect, let me see. He inspected, he discovered that this is not a cheese. This is rotten cheese. This is the cheese that usually someone will have with a wine. So he said, but this is not a normal cheese. Normal cheese, you have to pay 10% tax. It's considered luxury item, which is what is a rotten cheese. And because it's rotten cheese is a luxury item, you are bringing these glasses of cheese, we are gonna charge you for them 30%. So the trader was not happy. He told him, come on, this is a normal cheese. I'm only bringing glasses of cheese. What's wrong with you? He said, no, these are glasses of rotten cheese. So this is why you are gonna pay 30%, not 10%. The trader, he said, is there any way for us to fix the situation? Maybe I give you some money. He said, no, not allowed. So at the end, he paid 30%, and the guy inspected all the boxes, ensured that all these glasses of cheese made out of rotten cheese, and he was happy. After 1 week, this inspector in the customs was called by his supervisor. And his supervisor told him, what happened? Why you allowed this guy to bring all these glasses of cheese and you didn't charge him the proper taxes? He said, what do you mean? I inspect all the glasses. All of them, they have rotten cheese. He said, yes. So why you didn't make him pay 50%? He said, why 50%? For the cheese, he had only to pay, because it's a rotten cheese, he should pay what? He should pay 30%. He said, no, I'm not speaking about the cheese. I'm speaking about the glasses, the crystal glasses that the cheese was in. So the trader was trying to focus the attention of the inspector on the cheese to be able to distract him from the glasses. And this is what happened in our world we are living in. Fraudsters are always smart in understanding what kind of things you are going to look for when you are trying to do anti-fraud control or when you are doing fraud examination. And they are going to distract you with different figures, with different information, with different data. So you are lost with these data and you will not find exactly what you are looking for. Or they are using different techniques. So you are thinking they are using the old techniques and they are tricking you. It's like a magician. He said, look at my hand, and they do magic. And after that, what? You are expecting they are going to do this magic in this hand, and they do it with another hand. It's exactly like in boxing. Someone is hitting you always on one side, and you are expecting the punch on this side. Then you are covering, and then he will hit you on the other side, and you are done. And this is exactly what will happen. For us as a fraud examiner, we need to adapt to new technology. We need to go and read magazines, like the Fraud Magazine by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, to learn about new ways of someone doing fraud. There's a very interesting case happened in New Jersey when one guy, he thought about doing tax fraud against the government in a new innovative way. How? He went to the rich guys and they say, listen, I know that you pay taxes around 30 to 35% to the government. I have a way for you to pay less. They say, how? They say, completely legal. They say, really legal? Wow, how? He said, you can donate your money to the charities. So if you donate your money to schools, to charities, in that way you have only to pay zero. You don't have to pay anything. They say, but we lose all our money. He said, no, no, no. These charities, I know them. So what will happen? You can donate 100,000 to a charity, and in that way you write it off. You don't have to pay any taxes on it. But the charity will take 10% only. I take 5%, and then they give you the money back indirectly. And he was able to convince so many charities, schools to do that. He was able to convince so many guys in government and rich guys to do that. And then the government uncovered the scheme. But look, always someone is coming up with a new, creative way of how can I do fraud in a way that no one will catch me. And you as a fraud examiner, you need to be able to figure out what are the new schemes that are going to come to be able to catch it in real time. Now, the ninth thing that you need to have, the skills that you need to have for you, which is very important to do your job, is what we call specialized expertise. Today, so many individuals working in anti-fraud, they say, yeah, I have the knowledge related to fraud examination in general. I have the knowledge related to anti-fraud in general. This is not enough. Today, you are working in oil and gas. You are working in banking. You are working in government. You are working in a different manufacturing operation. Do you have the proper technical expertise to be able to handle investigation in that environment? Do you have the critical skills for you as a fraud examiner to figure out the different fraud schemes that can happen in that industry? Do you know how can you conduct investigation and collect evidence in the banking compare when you are working in oil and gas? Every different industry, they have different practices and different system. So it's very important for you to not only figure out the investigation technique, but understand from the legal department in the industry you are working with. How can we collaborate with the law enforcement or not? What are the regulations in our industry? So your ability to think in a critical way, solve the problem, figuring out the different complex scheme in your industry is very critical. And figuring out at the same time who are the stakeholders that we need to communicate to. Is it inside the organization? Or do we need to speak with the regulators? Do we need to speak with the board of directors? How we need to speak with different law enforcement related to our fraud case? Having the proper skills. This is why so many of my clients, they say, yeah, we need courses related to banking fraud, not fraud in general. We need a course I just recently conducted for a big organization in oil and gas. They said, give us cases and examples related to fraud in oil and gas. And I'm doing another training also for a large oil and gas company where they need special training, not in general fraud, no. How can we uncover fraud related to the purchasing, related to the contracts fraud in oil and gas? So having this specialized knowledge in certain area is very important for you to be able to know how to do your job properly. So my recommendation to you, stop going to these general conferences and general courses where they speak in general. No, try to find something specific. Like one person called me, he said, do you have a specific course related to fraud schemes in the insurance? See, this is very specific, which is interesting. Do you have any courses related to fraud schemes that can happen in the retail? Because insurance and retail, or in hotels, or in hospitals. See, different environment, they have different kind of schemes. So go and try to gain this expertise in your industry. So in that way you become anti-fraud leader in your domain. Now the final skill, which is very important for all of us to have as anti-fraud professionals, is lastly, is to have what we call continuing learning and development. You need to understand that you as anti-fraud professionals, you need to go and adapt to the continuous learning techniques. You need to be able to gain new skills. As anti-fraud professionals, we are operating in 2024. And in 2024, we need to have commitment to ongoing learning. We need to go and understand what kind of new courses and new certifications we need to learn. What are the new industry best practices? What are the new emerging fraud? What are the new threats that we have? What are the leadership skills that we need to equip ourselves with for us to be able to meet the evolving environment change, the technological changes? To be able to understand how can we go and upgrade our knowledge. Just now, ACFE soon are going to be updating the CFE exam, which is very nice. So what ACFE did, which is very interesting, ACFE went and analyzed the work environment. And they said, let's do a study to understand what are the skills that anti-fraud professionals should have. What are the job description of the anti-fraud professionals? The person who's doing fraud examination, the person who is doing fraud interview, the person who's handling fraud cases. And they came up with a full skills list, and based on that, they are revising the CFE certificate. where they are going to go and say, these are the new skills that, for example, today we are focusing on data analytics, we are focusing on AI, we need to understand the regulatory environment, we need to understand how can we conduct digital forensic. So these are the new skills that you as a fraud examiner, you need to gain. You need to always gain and advance your skills to be able to proactively identify fraud, to safeguard the interests of the businesses and individual inside your organization in the ever-changing landscape, to be able to handle fraud cases in the 2024, in the digital age we are living in. So if you want to win the game of fraud, you need to apply all this knowledge and skills that we are speaking about to be able to advance in your professional career. And here we are doing a very interesting anti-fraud leadership challenge for you. So are you willing to accept the challenge? You tell me. We are launching today what we call anti-fraud leadership challenge. And I would like you to join our challenge. So what is the challenge? I want you to select one of the skills we discussed today in our session, and I want you to try to implement it over the next 30 days. So over the next 30 days, I want you to go and get knowledge about everything related to the subject. It can be related to cybercrime, it can be related to money laundering, it can be related to digital forensic. And go buy a book, watch a training, go attend a class, watch a video on YouTube, and gain all the knowledge you can over 30 days. But the challenge will not finish over 30 days. After that, after the 30 days finish, go select another one and do the same thing over and over 10 months. In that case, within 10 months, you will master all the skills you need to be able to become an anti-fraud leader. And we are going to be here with you, and we have so many upcoming sessions related to anti-fraud that you can join. This is the first session related to anti-fraud boxing skills that you need to have for you to be able to fight fraud. And we are going to do so many other sessions to teach you the anti-fraud boxing technique, to help you understand how you need to fight fraudsters, how you need to find entrepreneurs who are doing fraud, how you need to fight what we call the cyber wolves, the financial villains who are stealing from our financial market, and the fraudsters in the business ring. So make sure you subscribe to my channel to get all the update related to all the sessions that we are doing, and stay tuned with more anti-fraud leadership sessions to come. Thank you so much for joining me today in this amazing session, and I will see you in the boxing arena in the next anti-fraud fighting round. Stay tuned.